Is that going to work? Yeah, there we go. All right, we got some audio now. Hey, how is everyone? Are you hearing my dulcet tones now? Yeah, I love this mic, but man, that plug is just, it's so frustrating. The thing comes out like at just the, just the, a gnat could land on that cable and it would pop out. So, anyway, how is everyone today? I hope you're doing well. We had a great time yesterday and the day before. Or yesterday, and I should say the live stream before, because we talked about the history of alignment in Dungeons and Dragons and found out that it goes all the way back to chainmail. In fact, chainmail is the fantasy supplement is 90% D&D. You know, I mean, it's really the proof positive that Gary Gygax did in fact by himself invent Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, personally, I think the OD&D booklets should say, Dungeons and Dragons by Gygax and Perrin. That's just my 2 cents. I don't know what Jeff Perrin's level of participation exactly was, but there we are. Hello, Simile, and hello, Cerulean. Good to see you guys in the chat. So yeah, we got our hands dirty in some D&D history. We rolled up our sleeves and we dove right into that. So we're just gonna kind of chill today. We're just gonna relax a little bit, and I'm just gonna talk about some things that spring to mind, and just sort of relax a little bit. One thing I did want to do was recap last night's AD&D game. Of course, this has been a long-going game now, and this summer, good night. This summer, this game will have been going for 7 years now, I think. Yeah, and it's all the same World of Greyhawk campaign. Different characters, folks have dipped in and out. I've had Ben Poir was part of it. He's working on that massive mega dungeon thing. Shout out to Ben. How are you, Ben? And what else? Of course, I've had one player in there who has been in there almost from the beginning. Aurora Williams. Hi, Aurora. She has been in this game for like 6.5 of those 7 years, running a couple of different characters. Conflict designer Kyle Schuant gamed with us for a while. Yeah, I've got a pretty good stable of players, and I'm very, very, very happy about it. Well, thank you for rewatching the videos, Cerulean. If you got any questions, you can ask in the comments. You can ask me now. I'm more than happy to discuss that. But yeah, so the Monday night game's been going a long time. I've got a solid stable of 11 players. My buddy Steve was in it for a while. He's dipped out to run his own games. Hopefully he'll come back someday. And I'm hopeful about that because he took his character and was like, yeah, I want some, I want my cut of the treasure and some magic items before I go. He didn't just say, well, I'm leaving, bye. So that gives me some confidence that that Steve will bring his illusionist back. And boy, this current session has really taught me the power of the illusionist as a spell casting class. I mean, it's nuts. Hello, Chris. Greetings, people of Earth. But anyway, so last night was actually not that exciting. I was in a mood. I was peaked yesterday evening. It's just a lot of silly shit going on here. Just things on my mind. Nothing real. nothing really oriented with a family. Just stuff in the old soup bowl up there. So I was ready to tell the players, look, put your character sheets in plastic slip covers and get a wax crayon or a dry erase marker handy, because you're gonna need it. But no, it was kind of fun. They spent the vast majority of their time in the city of Greyhawk. We did some XP handouts I gave them, and then I gave I gave a few magic. Well, I don't say I gave a few magic items out. The party went shopping for magic items. Now, I am not opposed to magic shops, and I generated up a trio of stores that have fantastical things in the city of Greyhawk. But, and if you're one of my players and you're listening to this, I'm sorry to disappoint you. That stuff is limited stock. It's not like, oh well, we're gonna get potions and you're gonna be able to just go and buy potion. No, any items outside the stock that I just randomly generated for those three stores, yeah, you're gonna have to get made. Like, I'm not keeping the stores stocked. I kind of follow Gary's admonition that having magic shops is not the exact way that you want to approach. Excuse me, stretching out a little bit. Is not the exact way you want to approach things. Make the characters fight for the truly powerful magic items. But there were some things for sale, and indeed some of the things that those magic shops had for sale, the characters had sold to them long before and were just so expensive that they never sold them out. Like, they went looking for healing potions and found a 2 jars of Keotum's ointment that they had sold, in real world terms, a couple of years ago. So 10,000 gold pieces. Only this time, rather than saying, oh well, shit, we need it. Was it 10,000 or 20,000? I can't remember. But they all essentially kicked in and got Keotum's ointment. Now, if you're not playing D&D enough, or it's not in later editions, I don't follow things after first edition, but Keotum's ointment is kind of a super healing potion that does 1d4 plus 8 healing damage, and it neutralizes poison, and I think it cures disease also. I'll have to go back and look. And there's 5 doses in a jar. So basically, they bought the equivalent of 10 healing potions that also meant 10 neutralized poison potions. And so they were quite glad to get their hands on the Keotum's ointment. One of them bought a ring. They bought a couple of rings. They bought a ring of invisibility that was very expensive, but they have lots of treasure. And they also purchased the dual class cleric / magic user in the party. Bought a ring that gives ogre strength 1800. Now, generally speaking, only fighters do percentile strength in AD&D. So if you're playing a magic user, like if your intent is to be a magic user and you roll that first character stat and it 3 6s, like strength 18, you don't then roll percentile dice to see like how much of an 18 you are. If you're a fighter, and you roll an 18, yes, you then do percentile strength. Um, I view magic items that specifically state that they give you an 18 double nuts, an 1875, what have you, because they're magic items, they exceed that amount. So the cleric magic user bought himself a ring of ogre strength for the bargain price of 1,000 gold. Now, I don't know if any of my players are watching this stream, so I'm not really going to talk too much about the ring and what it is. Let's just say he got a lot more argumentative with the party after he bought the ring, and leave it at that, despite the fact that he's a brawny thewed wizard now. So yeah, that's that's a lot of what they did, and then they sold some gems, which is a bit of a head scratcher. I would hang on to gems. Gems are here's the thing. If I gave you $50,000, yeah, it would be kind of a hassle to carry $500 bills. Is that right? Yeah, to carry $500 bills around with you. But why would you take and get that broken up into $10 bills? You know what I'm saying? I mean, so the party sold off just rafts and rafts of gems, which they were then able to use to go out and go shopping with. By the time we'd been through there, all of the shopping and so on, the party elected to go back to Castle Greyhawk, so everyone packed up. I rolled for random encounters. I was hoping that they would bump into something terrible out there, and alas, they did not, and they arrived safely at Castle Greyhawk. A couple of interesting things did happen, and they involved the bard. However, no, he did not seduce and have sex with a female treant, so stop asking. I don't know. He first he saw a cittern in the in for sale in one of the magic shops, and almost bought it, but it would have been a serious downgrade from the instrument of the bards that he currently has. Well, he has two. He has a DOS lute, and then he has a I can't remember what the other one is, but he also has a lyre of building, or maybe he's a DOS lute, another bard of the instruments, and a lyre of building. Yeah, that's it. He's got quite the collection of magical instruments. And when they arrived at Castle Greyhawk, they said, "Okay, well, we have 25 men in total. They've got 4 hirelings, 4 men at arms that they've had employed for forever, 9 light foot, and 9 heavy cavalry, and then they have a wagon that has like a teamster and a couple of animal handlers, because it's pulled by, I can't remember if it's mule or oxen. I'll have to ask them on that. So they have this rather large retinue of folks under them, and when they go into the dungeon, rather than just leave them, well, for lack of a better term, stranded outside, they employ, the party paladin has a Daern's instant fortress, which, if you're not familiar with that magic item, basically it's just a tiny metal cube that the owner sets on the ground and invokes, and it produces a tower with 3 floors. Well, a ground floor, a second floor, and then a roof top naturally located with battlements and so on, that is 30 foot square. So, it's got some nice living space. So they were kind of going back and forth on, okay, do we want to put the horses and everybody in the barn? But then the bard remembered that Jeremy Rule, playing our bard, he remembered, like, hey, what if I use the lyre of building and create a barn? And if the lyre of building, when played, will perform the construction ability of 100 men for 3 days. So, and it only takes 3 turns. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I've seen plenty of movies. You remember Witness with Harrison Ford back in the 80s, where, you'd have the Amish just over the course of a day just raise a barn. Well, I figure 100 men working for 3 days would do a good Amish barn raising, right? So they had their castle, and now they have a barn. So there's this little castle that the men at arms can stay in, and then a barn next to it that they can keep all the horses in. So that was kind of neat. That they have a little settlement. They have a steading outside of Castle Greyhawk for all of their men at arms who travel with them and protect them on adventures. Now, what's curious is they don't take their men at arms into the dungeon with them. They just have them outside guarding the horses, which that's kind of up to the players, right? But it strikes me odd that with all we've talked about taking men at arms into the dungeon, they now don't feel that necessary. But they also haven't fired them. They've just got them basically keeping a camp for them. Although now they're practically running an inn for them. It's going to be funny as they get up out of the dungeon after a few days, and the men at arms are like, okay, here's your bill. And they're paying the men at arms, of course. I just thought it would be humorous if they did that. So that was Monday night's AD&D game. They got to Castle Greyhawk. It literally got up to the top of the hour where they got on the elevator. They pushed the button and they're like, we're punching for the 2nd floor. And Dan's magic user is like, no, we should punch for the 3rd floor. So it may be, it's going to be interesting. So now they're about to exit onto the 3rd floor or 2nd floor of Castle Greyhawk and go deal with some bad guys. And that's where we left it off. So that is the Monday night game. And as always, there are there's a couple of seats open if anyone's interested in playing it all. I just want to check something here because I got a message earlier today. Let me see. Yes. Kevin Reynolds sent to me. He asked if I was familiar with the Twilight 2000, the new Free League Twilight 2000. And we've talked about it quite a bit here on the show. I have not seen the unboxing, but based on what I've heard from people, veterans of having played Twilight 2000 for many years, who were tapped to be beta testers or volunteered to be beta testers of it, it ain't for me. It ain't my Twilight 2000. It looks rather like Hasbro did with, or Wizards of the Coast, and then Hasbro did with D&D, which was acquire the name Dungeons and Dragons, hollow the game out, slot their own game inside the husk, and say, Look, this disturbing animatron that's crawled straight up out of Uncanny Valley is the game you knew and loved, despite the fact that it fucking well isn't. Um, Free League has done the same thing with Twilight 2000. That a lot of its backstory is now just pure Orange Man bad. And look, I'm never going to turn this channel into an internet blood sport. Uh, you know, Controversy of the day thing, unless it has to do directly with role playing games. Um, so I'm just going to leave it there. But that was never the thrust of the goddamn game. All right. It's about soldiers caught in an impossible situation. Look, who cares? Even from a game mastering standpoint, who cares who started the war? I mean, you want the perfect background for Twilight 2000? Go listen to War Pigs by Black Sabbath. There's your background fluff. There is your fucking background fluff for Twilight 2000. War Pigs by Black Sabbath. Oh, and by the way, Black Sabbath were pretty based. They got interviewed and were talking about various topics, and the subject of communism came up, and they all, even Ozzy, agreed right then and right there that communism was awful, and the United States was the only nation that had the backbone to stand up. So they're to it and against it. There's my political rant for the day. It doesn't fucking belong in Twilight 2000, and fuck you, Free League, for doing that to my game. Anyway. Cerulean. Alignment question. So I cannot figure out what Gygax meant by law chaos. The strategic review describes dictatorships versus anarchy above. Alignment is typically used to describe how randomly or predictably one acts. Is there a clean explanation? Okay, so Gary was kind of broadly discussing what in a world setting law would be like and what chaos would be like. Like, he was really channeling Three Hearts and Three Lions. Christendom in Three Hearts and Three Lions is law, and fairy is chaos. If you are fully invested, if you are an elf in Three Hearts and Three Lions, let me make that clarification. In this book, which I still have not put away, if you are an elf, then your tendency is going to be towards soullessness, towards revelry, hedonism, constant pleasure, that sort of thing. Because you're in a society, you're in a mystical part of the world, untouched by the message of Christendom, and that's how you're going to live. Whereas if you're in a civilized place where men have tamed the wilderness and have established Christianity or other organized religions. He mentions Islam in Three Hearts and Three Lions. Those are all places where you're going to find order and good, for lack of a better term. And people of that mean are generally going to congregate. Lawful people will congregate towards a lawful society. Chaotic people will tend to congregate towards a chaotic society. You're not going to find a neighborhood full of say, bugbears living and working inside the city of Greyhawk. You're not going to find a community of halflings living in the kingdom of Ayus in the world of Greyhawk. Does that help, Cerulean? I hope that helps. Just a passerby. Biden condemns the TTRPGs. They are more insidious than World of Warcraft. War Pigs is one of the best anti-war songs. I mean, people tend to overlook a lot of Black Sabbath's message. Their songs absolutely had meaning. They were very concerned with the state of the world. They just didn't do it mostly with acoustic guitars and tambourines and so on. Geezer and Ozzy and Tommy and I can't. Well, the band was a little bit less, sunshine and flowers, and a little bit more. There's 27,000 nuclear weapons on the other side of the Iron Curtain pointed at us. And we've got about 19,000 in total from England all the way to the United States pointed at them. And then all it's going to take is some guy scratching his balls at the wrong time and we're all going to burn. They dipped into fantasy sometimes. The Wizard, depending on who you talk to, the song The Wizard is either about their cocaine dealer or Gandalf. Ozzy claims that the Wizard is about Gandalf. That's probably one of those things we'll never be in a position to know. But I believe he said when interviewed just a couple of years ago about the Wizard, he said, "This is a great place. I play some. Singing." So there you go. I mean, it's clear as a bell. So Cerulean, let me know if that clarifies things for you. That it was less of a. I think it was less of a, giving alignments to whole societies and more like, here's where you're more likely to find people grouped. You could certainly make oh God, I'm doing what I said I wasn't going to do. All right, I'm going to do this one time. And I won't answer any questions about this or engage in further discussion about this. I just want to make this observation of lawful versus chaos. You could make the argument that comparatively, even in a nation of laws like the United States or our hat, Canada, that things tend to be kind of chaotic here. People do what they want, when they want, with little to no repercussion. That's not a political statement. We just do things. I'm doing this today. My wife's working from home. My kids are sleeping in because it's summer. So you could broadly make the claim that we're living the chaotic good life here. In North Korea, things are very lawful in North Korea. But it is lawful evil. Because if you wake up in the morning and decide to say, use your little tiny portable video player that somebody smuggled you from China, if you get caught, you will be executed for watching TV, watching Western media. Anyway, let us move on before we have any more discussions about real world and alignment, because I was not going to do that, and I'm still not going to do that. Chris, I'm not sure why your players leave men at arms outside the dungeon. Are they worried that someone's going to take the horses, or are they tough enough to easily handle everything you throw at them? Generally speaking, it's the latter. They have the men at arms to help them carry tons of treasure, and if someone, like, there's enough party members that if one or two party members are incapacitated and got to spend that week on their backs, they can transport them back to the surface. But obviously, they don't want to A, leave for the city, or B, leave that person lying unattended in an open camp. So they basically establish a surface base camp. Think of it like Sherpas. Like, you might take some Sherpas up the mountain with you, but having a dozen or so back at base camp with the bottled oxygen and the dried fruit and the honeyed tea and the bandages for scrapes on your hands and so on and etc. That's how I kind of view it. To round up music, have you seen this? Passerby, if you're trying to share a link, even if you can see it, I can't, just because of how the chat system in YouTube works. If you want to type the description of it, or like put some spaces, like chop up the URL a little bit to make it work. So yeah, I found that out the hard way when I try and share things to live streams. Like, oh, you should check this out, doink. And whoever was doing the live stream was like, check what out? So that's kind of where I am. So chop up the URL, and you can send it to me. So, and I'll wait till that gets there. Cerulean, let me know if that explanation of alignment helped. I'm not going to not talk about alignment. I'm just not going to talk about real world alignment kind of things. So if that answered your question, then great. And if it didn't, then let's address it. I always want to be clear. So tomorrow, I don't believe Kyle is going to be able to participate tomorrow, but we'll do something tomorrow. I don't know. Would you guys kind of like a studio tour? I'll just show you around. We can do that tomorrow and set up the camera so I can move it around some. I mean, there's not a lot to see. Like, if you've been following my videos, the place I used to have the camera set up was over on the other side of the room, pointing at me with my bookshelf behind me and the desk off to my left. This is kind of a new-ish setup, me sitting over on this side of the room. It's like 10 feet by 11 feet. So when I say studio tour, I'm not like Bitwit Kyle, where like, oh, I'm gonna walk you around my warehouse, and oh, there's a pile of GTX 3080s, and oh, look at it, oh, I'm doing this $12,000 computer build for this e-celebrity, and blah blah. That's not what I mean. Warfaring Strangers, Dark Scorched Canticles, a D&D themed album with a compilation of 70s hard rock bands singing about fantasy. I will check that out. I will definitely check that out. I have not heard that, but man, I am very much like last night when we played. The players couldn't hear it. I don't. I had my mic up, but and my speakers going, but I don't like to play music too much over Discord just because I don't like competing with it, and it might blow some people out. Depending on how they have their audio set up and whatnot. But like when we're gaming here at the house, which hasn't happened in years, unfortunately, I will absolutely, positively play some classic rock. Rainbow, Sabbath, Sabbath with Dio by himself, Led Zeppelin, some stuff by Maiden, And I mean, there's even like unexpected stuff, things that you, oh yeah, that's classic rock, but I don't really, but Two Rolling Stoned by Robin Trower, to me, that's just like the listening to the song, and I know the song is about dealing with like all the sycophants and hangers on, um, and terrible people that surround musicians. I get that, but there's just this funky vibe to Two Rolling Stoned by Trower that just it like I just have this mental image of like this never made film of like uh Ralph Bakshi animating Frank Frazetta art, uh and this lone barbarian riding across the plains, with Two Rolling Stone playing in the background. So yeah, there's a lot of little bits and pieces that can fit in there. The occasional track by Styx, stuff like that. All of that fits my D&D groove very well. When people talk about music in D&D, that's what I think of. And of course, film scores too. But I mean, just talking solely about rock and roll, there's some tracks that will just like knock me out of the mood completely. Oh, there went my light. Um, that just kind of like, I'm not gonna play KMFDM during a game of D&D. I just, which is not to say all industrial is out. Der Meister by Rammstein. If you know the lyrics in English, they actually very much fit kind of a dungeon exploration vibe almost. Although the song is largely, it's like you want to drop the needle on that during combat. So there's music from all over the place that I can sit and listen to and enjoy in a D&D game, but you keep the volume low just so it doesn't drown out players. Like I said, I played Led Zeppelin 1, 2, and 3 while we gamed last night, but I kept the volume low enough so it was there to keep my imagination churning, but I was mostly listening to the players. Now, if God had blessed me in such a way that I was able to be in exactly the same place as my players, and I can't. I have folks here in Florida, I've got friends in California, some people on the Northeast coast, Midwest, folks up in the Pacific Northwest. We're scattered, just spread across the entire country. But if we all could have been in the same room, yeah, I would have had, I would have put on physical graffiti or like last night, Led Zeppelin 1, 2, and 3, just because it fits. Rush is a good one, if you've seen the most wonderful I went blank, SLC Punk. If you haven't, do check out you can probably just find it on YouTube, like SLC Punk D&D scene. But it starts out with two early high school nerds who become the popular kids, and they become the popular kids by turning to punk music and being these outcasts, and like everybody wants to get to know and hang around with these these rebellious guys, and at the opening of the movie, one of the main characters who he got bullied or something like that in school that day or the day before, goes to his friend's house, and his friend has a stereo down in his basement, and he's got the cameras panning across, and there's D&D manuals and miniatures and that sort of thing, and The Trees by Rush is playing on the stereo. and his friend comes in and he's bitching about the raw deal he's gotten and how people shit on them all the time, and he starts railing about D&D, and he's like, so in this music, he's like, what are you talking about? This music is fantastic. This is Rush. Their music is technically excellent and perfection. He said, yeah, okay, Rush isn't bad, but what if we just listen to something different? And the reaction by the guys, don't touch my stereo. He's like, okay, but I tell you what, let me just play this tape for you, and if you don't like it, we'll go back to listening to Rush. And he puts in, and it's it's just some Black Flag or something like that. But that kind of launches the movie into its next phase. That's the end of the D&D part. But yeah, they're listening to The Trees by Rush, and I can't help but chuckle when I hear The Trees. Not that it gets played much anymore. That's one of those tracks that just they don't, they don't play on the radio now. If you hear Rush on the local classic rock stations, it's either Red Barchetta, Spirit of Radio, Working Man, or Tom Sawyer. That's it. Those are the 4 tracks by Rush that you're ever going to hear. You're never going to hear The Trees or Temple of Syrinx or 2112 Overture. I guess Working Man, you might hear Working Man. Just a passerby getting SLC punk right now. All right, I think you'll enjoy it. It's not a D&D geek movie. It's very much about these guys being punk rock slackers and everything. It's got some absolutely heartwarming moments. One of the main characters has baby boomer parents, ex-hippies, and he's very enthusiastically talking to them. I mean, I don't want to spoil it, but it's a touching moment, and also an expression of fuck you punk ethos. You'll know it when you see it. So do check out SLC Punk. The little mention of Dungeons and Dragons is fun. I have always wanted to compile, and I think one day, if I can figure out how to do it, and I may even have to do it not live, but just make a video and upload it, is like a canonical clip show of references to Dungeons and Dragons. Not like Creatures and Caverns or Mazes and Monsters. We filed off the serial numbers because Wizards of the Coast or TSR would have sue us for doing this. But actual, honest to God, these people are talking about or playing Dungeons and Dragons in media. And I think I talked to Ishii about this, and I mentioned it on the show here before. I mentioned it on the live stream before. But I'm going to copy and paste this. But a lot of people think, oh well, can really talk about D&D, but the Mazes and Monsters, Tom Hanks is it's not. The film Taps, which let me see. Taps came out in 1981, and it stars George C. Scott, Timothy Hutton, and Ronnie Cox. It also has Tom Cruise in it. Let's see. So we got George C. Scott, Timothy Hutton, Ronnie Cox, Sean Penn, Tom Cruise, Billy Van Zant's in it. Believe it or not, Giancarlo Esposito is in it. Gus Fring is in Taps. But the The premise is kind of silly. A bunch of students at a military school that is ordered to close before the junior class gets a chance to become seniors and graduate. Um, so yeah, they get this order to close, and the students basically stage a rebellion. They seize the school's armory, which the paper thin, onion skin thin premise of why a school for adolescent boys has fully operational 50 caliber machine guns and ammunition and mortars and landmines and M16s and all that jazz. Basically, enough stuff to equip a small battalion of soldiers exists, you know. But early on in the movie, when things are still happy go lucky, Tom Cruise's character is walking down the hall, and there's a bunch of cadets coming and going, and one of them calls out to him and says, "Hey, are you going to play Dungeons and Dragons with us tonight?" He says, "No, man, I got to study," and then keeps on going. I don't think, so this is 1981, I don't think there is another solid reference to Dungeons and Dragons in film prior to that. Let me see. So check out E.T. E.T. came out in 1982 and has its Dungeons and Dragons references, but I can honestly not remember, if you guys can correct me on this, whether or not they actually ever say Dungeons and Dragons, or if it's just them, you know, shouting and there's stuff going on. Now, I know in the book, the novelization of the film written by William Kotzwinkle, they directly reference Dungeons and Dragons, but it isn't. I don't think it's given its name in the film. But if I'm wrong about that, that's fine. All right, Cerulean's got some serious talk. Alignment Part 2. With what you explain, societies can easily be placed. However, what about individual people? Is alignment describing their preferred society? If so, is this axis helpful in categorizing difficult decisions about the greater good or obeying an evil king? You know, I'm going to have to leave the greater good or obeying an evil king. Thank you, passerby. I'm going to have to leave that up to the individual decision of the players. I just think that for the most part, for the large majority, like you take, look, the Grand Duchy of Jeff in Greyhawk is a good place, and good people are going to gravitate there and live there. Now, you're going to have evil people there, not necessarily armies looking to usurp and destroy and burn down, but just people looking to take advantage of suckers. You know, like, oh, you're good. Okay, sure. Hey, buddy, why don't you let me help the poor? I'll take some of that money you've got and distribute it to them. Yeah, you know, and you're gone with it. So there are chaotic people are going to infiltrate lawful societies to do minor acts of chaos, not necessarily to usurp them. If the acts, okay, so I really want to give Cerulean his due. With what you explain, societies can easily be placed. However, what about individual people? Is alignment describing their preferred society? Again, I would tend to think that the average person would gravitate towards a lawful and good person would gravitate towards a lawful and good society. You know, I'm never going to move to North Korea. I get a pretty good shake of freedom here. And I think that's the case for 99.9999999% of people in the United States, is that we want to stay where it's good and things are good and we're treated well. even people who've gone over with the purest of intentions, just to see things themselves, you know, hand stuck in pocket. I bow when you tell me to bow. I'll pray to the statue of Kim when you tell me to pray to the statue of Kim. I'll follow all the orders. Yeah, the North Koreans might just grab you and throw you in a camp for a few months, beat you and starve you. You didn't do anything wrong, but you're a good person trying to do things with an evil government watching over you all the time. Is the Axis helpful in categorizing difficult decisions about the greater good or obeying an evil king? That is really... that's really something you're going to have to answer for yourself and for your players. I find that the alignment axes, as explained in the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Player's Handbook, pretty much lay it out. And most of my players tend not to worry too much about, you know, larger social moral quandaries. I don't feel like throwing a lot at my players, like, you know, this is a lawful society, but they have slaves. But you have to obey the law because you're lawful good. So isn't this good? That no. That's like the room full of baby orcs thing, you know. It's just like, you know, a society that's lawful but horrible to its subjects, like, you know, let's say some lawful evil king rises in Greyhawk. And he's like, here's a set of rules. And, you know, if you can't do X, then you'll be enslaved and you'll be sold as slavery. A paladin's not going to ride into that and say, well, those are the laws, and, you know, he's the appointed king. All of that stuff in D&D, all evil goes back to evil beings. You know, a society of bugbears is probably, you know, they're Hexstar worshippers. Doesn't matter that they've got a society. They're getting ready to do something terrible. You know, they're, you know, and oh, so, you know, we should destroy that society because, you know, yes, absolutely. Things in Dungeons and Dragons are labeled with alignments that makes it very easy to know which to put your sword in. So I don't know. I mean, it really comes down to how you want to interpret alignments for your campaign. But that, in the overall, I think is the way the mechanism, quote unquote, works. So I don't know if that helps. I hope it does. So really nice. I love military academy stories. Yes, TAPS should be fascinating. My wife watched about 15 minutes of TAPS with me, and one scene in it like broke her heart. Like, just she got choked up. So, and I will tell you what it is after you see it. But anyway, so there's TAPS, and I'm trying to think of the next major mention of actual Dungeons and Dragons in media. And saying the D&D cartoon would be a little bit meta. Well, the evil king is evil. He's labeled so. He's tied to evil powers. So you usurp him, and you free the people under his boot heel, and establish a good king. Anyway, let me see. There's Taps. It's glossed over in ET, so we can't really count ET. D&D cartoon is too meta, you know. Saying a cartoon about D&D is a reference to D&D. It's I mean, there's been a lot over the last 20 years. I mean, there has been a ton of it mentioned by name. Um, oh, you're very welcome, Cerulean. But I'm not really, man. Now, I know people could probably come up with other ones, but I think it was in the mid 1990s in an episode of The X Files um, uh, called Jose Chung's From Outer Space, which was the first episode of The X Files I ever saw. My wife said, she was my girlfriend at the time. She's like, "Oh, do you want to watch The X Files with me?" And I'm like, "Sure, everybody raves about the X Files. Let's watch it." And oh my God, this episode had Alex Trebek, Jesse Ventura, um, Jose Chung was, of course, played by Charles Nelson Riley. It is a tongue in cheek, complete, absolute parody, spoof, send up of the X Files. And yet it's still a conspiracy episode. It's still part of the conspiracy overplot, which I thought was just fucking brilliant of Chris Carter. I mean, that just like, oh my God, you're such a gifted writer. But I thought like the X Files was like that all the time. It was like a comedy show all the time. So I was hooked, and then I watched the next one, which I think was a Monster of the Week. I was like, oh, this isn't funny. But there's a scene in there where there's this super nerdy type guy, and he talks about encountering the men in black and grays and that sort of thing, and how he didn't run away. He stayed there and kept recording with his little high 8 VHS mini cam. And Mulder or Scully or somebody, or Jose Chung is like, you didn't run away. And he's like, and he says specifically, I didn't play Dungeons and Dragons for all those years and not learn a little something about courage. So, and I think even like when I watched like reruns, I think they redubbed it, and he said like, I didn't play a paladin all those years and not learn something about courage. But he said Dungeons and Dragons the first time, so taps to that, like a 15-year gap in media. But there has to be somewhere on that landscape another mention of Dungeons and Dragons. DC Comics pictured a session of Dungeons and Dragons in an old issue of Legion of Superheroes, which is set in the 30th century. Oh, that's cool. That is pretty cool. If it was, depending on when it was in the 80s, that I think DC Comics had the Dungeons and Dragons license, and they were producing a D&D comic book. So depending on when it was in the 80s, it might have been a very nice dovetail for them. The D&D name is not mentioned in Cloak and Dagger, but the system and dice are featured. Yeah, that's another one. Jack Flack, the character who plays Jack Flack is the imaginary friend of the boy, the young boy, the protagonist in Cloak and Dagger. And when the boy envisions him, he pictures him as looking like his dad, and he's played by Dabney Coleman, and his father is played by Dabney Coleman. And the game, I actually saw the board game Cloak and Dagger, which was an interesting metagame, and I was very young at the time and I didn't think much of it, But I feel like the creators of Cloak and Dagger, the film, didn't quite get D&D or role-playing games. Or they didn't think the audience would, because it uses... I remember it used 20-sided percentiles and possibly an 8-sided, but it also it also was on a board, like a Monopoly board, and like you moved spaces on it. But the boxes, I recall, said something about role-playing game. TV series where detective interrogates a kid that plays tunnels and trolls. The line is something like, "You play Dungeons and Dragons." Well, there you go. That's passerby. If you can remember that, we may have another reference. Now there is a there was a detective TV show on, and if you're not familiar with this, in the United States, it was called Simon and Simon, a very fun TV show. Came on after Magnum PI, so of course I watched it. But in this particular episode, it was called Trapdoors. And a young boy buys his gaming stuff by hacking the bank computer, and he transfers tiny amounts of money into a bank account he has out of other accounts, and then goes to an ATM and takes the money out. Let me tell you guys something. Back in the early 80s, you could get like $5 out at an ATM. It wasn't like, you can have 20. That's like the minimum. Like you could walk up to an ATM and punch out $5. So he'd get a couple of, like $5 or whatever, and go to the hobby store. In the opening of the episode, and I'm almost tempted to count this, because as the camera pans across his bedroom, he has Grenadier minis. You can see the gold boxes, and he is very clearly, he's got graph paper out. It's obvious he's playing D&D, but they never mention it by name. It could be that Simon and Simon episode we're talking about. But it's been years since I saw it. Was it Peter Billingsley? No, it wasn't Peter Billingsley. It was a different young actor at the time. But the owner of the bank finds out that the kid can do this. He can basically make traceless, although how he gets caught is beyond me. But he kidnaps the kid because he's going to force him to put his hacking skills to use and make the balance transfer over to himself. It's like the princely sum of like $25,000 or something. It's like hardly worth doing now. It's like, oh, you want to make less money than a part-time employee at McDonald's? You want to potentially do 40 years for that? Did you tack a few zeros onto that, pal? But he kidnaps the kid at the end of it, and is going to basically abandon him to die in an old military installation in the hills above San Diego, the city where Simon and Simon happens. And Rick and AJ, the protagonists, go looking for him. And like, well, shit, we can't find him. But the kid did a smart thing. He pulled a multi-sided die. I want to say it was an 8-sider. He pulls out of his pocket and throws on the ground as the guy's dragging him away. And they find it. And they realize, holy crap, he's in there. So it was a very D&D-ish episode, and they never mention it by name, but I think it's in there. And I've talked about this a lot before on the live stream. I just want to try and build the canonical list of places where D&D gets mentioned, but on television and film. But you go back, start in 1974 and move forward. It's like, good Lord. And it's not too difficult to do. I mean, it's like, it's not going to show up in an episode of Barney Miller or Happy Days or All in the Family or Welcome Back Kotter or anything like that. It's but then it got mentioned on Simon and Simon or some other show that passerby remembers. So where those might be, it may be that we never have a complete list. You'd have to have a database of every script of every TV show and film from 1974 to present, and then you'd have to do a Boolean search through them for Dungeons and Dragons. Now, there was an episode of the Terminator Sarah Connor Chronicles that was titled Dungeons and Dragons, but had nothing to do with games at all. Like, it was, I think they just took the name because it sounded cool and it would appeal to the aging Gen Xers watching the show. When I looked up the synopsis of the show, I was like, Gaston, this has nothing to do with Dungeons and Dragons. But yeah, I'd like to be able to do that, but I'm pretty sure the foundational event is the mention in TAPS. And then by the 2000s it had exploded. You have 2 episodes of Community that prominently feature D&D as the driving force in the episodes, and the TV show The Goldbergs. They solve a rivalry with another family by having a D&D tournament. Passerby is just hoovering up everything I'm mentioning. Stranger Things exists because D&D. There's no denying that. Stranger Things is just like a meta D&D game that's been going on for 4 seasons now, and I love it. All the D&D references Tolkien used in his books. All right, go, done, boom. That was easy. Oh, look, I can do the same for I can do the same for Lord Dunsany, and finished. Oh my goodness. Well, this has certainly been a lot of fun today, and we had a lot of great conversation, guys. A lot more than I had originally planned for. I thought I would just come in and gab for half an hour and then say I don't really have anything else. But thank you everyone for being so wonderfully engaging today. Cerulean, I hope that helped you out a lot with the with the alignment issue. Passerby, enjoy your watching. Come back tomorrow and talk about, if you've watched some of this. Let me know. Let's hear your input. Chris, thank you for mentioning for just being here and saying hi. So I will let y'all go, and I'll be back tomorrow in the afternoon/evening, and maybe I'll show you guys some projects I'm working on here in the man cave. Just show off a few odds and ends. But until then, peace. I love you all. Thank you. Please subscribe if you're not subscribed. If you're just watching this, whether it's live or later, click that subscribe button. Click that bell. It really helps the channel out. And I will see you guys all tomorrow. Peace.